The NBA playoffs, the moment every true NBA fan eagerly awaits at the end of the regular season. The best of the best teams in that season give everything they got to compete and to advance in hopes of winning the prize at the end of the road, the NBA Finals. The playoff atmosphere is simply astounding. Players giving more effort than ever, as well as the fans, creating insane, memorable, and iconic moments throughout the playoffs. We just came off of the 2022 NBA playoffs, and there were some very memorable and crazy moments that took place. After watching every NBA playoff game I physically could, I started to wonder, in the past 10 years, what has been the best year for the playoffs? Which year has delivered the best series, games, teams, moments, everything, all combined in order to create the best playoff experience possible? And that's what I've done today. I've looked at the playoffs of the last 10 seasons and I've ranked them worst to best in order to find which playoffs truly was the best. Also, if you guys do enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It always helps out the channel. Once again, you don't have to. But I hope you do enjoy this video, and enough of me talking, let's get into this. Coming in as the worst playoffs in the past 10 seasons, we have the 2017 NBA playoffs. Now, every playoffs has its good moments, so let's bring those out here. In my opinion, the best series goes to Celtics-Wizards in the Eastern Conference semifinals. This was one of two series in this year's playoffs that went to a Game 7. And the home team won every single game in this playoff series, and plenty of these games were close. I'd say the best game of the series was Game 6 in Washington, where John Wall had a game-winning 3 to force a Game 7 in Boston, which they would end up losing. But compared to all the other lackluster series in this playoffs, this one definitely comes out on top. The best individual game in this series, I'd have to say, is Game 3 of Warriors vs. Cavaliers finals, as that has Kevin Durant's iconic clutch three-pointer that puts the Warriors up 3-0 in the series and pretty much seals the deal for them, winning their second ring in 3 years. But besides those rare bright spots in this year's playoffs, there was a large total of 5 sweeps, which isn't really good for entertainment, and only 2 Game 7s, which is lower than the average playoffs. Also, not to mention that the finals and both conference finals ended in 5 games or less. So there weren't any intense Game 6s or 7s that we saw. I think clearly this one deserves the last spot on this list. At number 9, we have the 2015 NBA playoffs, which is actually very similar to the 2017 NBA playoffs. The finals, I feel like, is a little bit better as it ended in 6 games and was pretty competitive for the first couple of games. However, the Kyrie injury was a huge letdown in what could have been an even better finals. Besides the finals, really nothing much goes on. There's 2 series that go to 7, including, in my opinion, the best series of this playoffs, Clippers vs. Spurs in the first round of the Western Conference. This series went to 7 and included Chris Paul's iconic game winner in Game 7 to send the Clippers on to the next round, and I also think that's the best game of this playoffs as well. So that's one of the few bright spots in this playoffs. Really nothing more to say about this playoffs. Super standard, kind of underwhelming, but just a little bit better than the 2017 playoffs. At number 8, we have the 2014 NBA playoffs. Now, this playoffs was off to an incredible start, as 5 out of the 8 series in the first round alone went to a Game 7. In my opinion, this was the best first round out of any playoffs in the past decade. However, what really lets this playoffs down is the finals, because in my opinion, it also has the worst finals in the past decade of Spurs Heat 2.0. And if you guys know anything about this finals, only 1 game was close. All other 4 games were blowouts, so there's super low entertainment value for this finals. The conference finals were pretty solid, as it was Heat against the Pacers going to 6 games, as well as Spurs against the Thunder going to 6 games. I'd have to give the best series of this playoffs to the Nets over Raptors, which ended in 7 games, and 6 out of the 7 games were neck and neck throughout the whole game. So a super entertaining playoff series. And I'd say the best game of the playoffs was actually Game 2 of the finals, Heat Spurs. As it's kind of a misleading game, the Heat only win by 2 points, but it was a very close finals game that made the series seem competitive. Of course, after that, the series sucked, because the Spurs blew the doors off of Miami for the remaining 3 games in that series. Once again, still kind of a lackluster playoffs, but we are moving in the right direction here. At number 7, we have the bubble playoffs of 2020. Now, this was by far the hardest playoffs to rank, as this may be some of the highest level of basketball played we've seen in the playoffs. There were plenty of series that went to a Game 7, and some Game 7s that were truly incredible. Also, it was a pretty solid finals that went to 6 games between the Lakers and the Heat. And in general, this was one of the most healthy playoffs we've seen due to the rest that the players got with the NBA's delay. However, all of this does come at the expense of the atmosphere. No fans at all. No cheering, no chants. It felt weird and empty at some points. So it's really kind of tough to gauge where this playoffs ranks. If there were fans, this would be probably a top 4 playoffs. I'd say the best series in this playoffs was Celtics-Raptors in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Now, this would be one of the best playoffs in NBA history if there were fans. I mean, we look at Game 3, and OG Anunoby's game-winning three-pointer with only 0.4 seconds left on the clock, saving the Raptors series entirely. And this led to them forcing a Game 7. Not to mention that Game 6 was a crazy double overtime game that the Raptors barely managed to squeeze out a win to force that Game 7. And the Game 7 was a good close-fought game as well. In my opinion, it's the best playoffs we've seen so far on this list. Obviously, there will be better playoff series coming up. And with all that said, I'd have to say the best game is probably Game 6 of this playoffs, the double overtime, stress-inducing as a Celtics fan game. But a huge honorable mention to the Nuggets-Jazz series that also went to 7 in the first round of the Western Conference, as those were all good-fought matches. And Game 7 literally ended by an in-and-out three-pointer that would have changed the whole scope of this series. For the circumstances given, this playoffs really did all it could, but once again, with the given circumstances is why it's not higher on this list. At number 6, we have the 2018 playoffs. Now, if we look at the finals was pretty bad. The Warriors sweep the Cavaliers. However, 2 of those games were very entertaining, Game 1 and 3. The place where this playoffs really shines is the conference finals, as both series went to incredible Game 7s. We have the Cavaliers vs. Celtics series and the Warriors vs. Rockets series. This is the only reason this playoff series is up this high. I think Warriors vs. Rockets series barely edges out the Cavs vs. Celtics series, just because I think there's more star power. I mean, these series are kind of equal as far as entertainment, but I'm just giving the tiebreaker to that series due to the fact that the winner of that series also would go on to win the finals. However, I'd say the best game of this playoffs would be Game 1 of Celtics vs. Bucks in the first round. This was an overtime game that Chris Middleton hit a miraculous shot to send the game into overtime, right after Terry Rozier had a lethal step-back 3 on Eric Bledsoe. The overtime was hard-fought as well, and this was the first game we've seen between these two teams, which definitely has become a rivalry, as we've seen them go against each other in playoffs in 2019, 2022, and I would not be surprised, as they're the 2 best teams in the Eastern Conference right now, if we see another playoff matchup between these 2 teams. So this game, in a sense, is also the spark of a rivalry. But 2018 provided us with a pretty solid playoffs. At number 5, we have the second to last playoffs, and that's the 2021 NBA playoffs. This playoffs was very solid across the board. A great NBA Finals between the Bucks and the Suns where all but one game was close. Solid conference finals between the Bucks and the Hawks, and the Suns and the Clippers that both went to 6 games. 2 insanely good semifinal series between the Hawks and Sixers and the Bucks and Nets that both went to 7. And the first round was a little bit lackluster, but it's definitely better how this playoffs has superior playoff rounds closer to the finals. I think the best series of this playoffs definitely goes to Bucks-Nets, as the Nets had an early 2-0 lead, but then Kyrie's injury led to this becoming a full-out battle in 7 games. And in one of the best playoff games in recent memory, Bucks-Nets Game 7 was one that was truly incredible to watch. I honestly think the Nets were the best team this season when healthy, and I think they would have won the finals if Kyrie didn't get injured. But at the same time, him getting injured also blessed us with an incredible playoff series. One very slight con, and this is just me being nitpicky, is that there was limited capacity at the stadiums during this time. So although it's better than the bubble by a long shot, the full roar of the fans is not seen as, say, the 2022 NBA playoffs, where the full fans are finally back. But that's just one thing I thought I'd add in. But besides that, this playoffs is pretty much good in every regard. At number 4, we have the 2019 playoffs. Now this playoffs is also just very good in general. First round was a little bit underwhelming, but the conference semifinals were great, as the Trailblazers and Nuggets and the Raptors and 76ers series both went to 7. The Warriors had a rematch against the Rockets that went to 6. We look at the Eastern Conference Finals, and that Raptors-Bucks series was very good, as most of those games were close, and the Raptors came back from a 2-0 deficit. Finally, if we look at the finals here, Raptors winning against the Warriors as underdogs, which sadly is a lot due to injury, as obviously everybody knows that Kevin Durant suffered a season-ending injury as well as Klay Thompson. So that kind of tainted the value of this playoffs, but at the same time it might have helped it a little bit, as I think if Klay and KD were fully healthy, this would be a lopsided finals. But I guess them being injured kind of evened the teams out a little bit more, and we saw some very hard-fought close games that we wouldn't have got if they were healthy. So obviously the finals isn't as good as it would have been, but there are some pros to get out of it. The best series is the Raptors 76ers series in the Eastern Conference semis, which also contains the best game, which I'm sure everybody knows, which is Kawhi Leonard hitting that game-winning shot in Game 7 to send the Raptors to the Eastern Conference Finals. And this series was very good. There was plenty of close games, and it was up in the air for a lot of the series, as 76ers had a series lead at one point, and then Raptors overtook them. So it was a very back-and-forth series, a lot of talent on both sides, and that's why I think not only the best game, but also the best series is this one. Overall, 2019 was a little bit injury-riddled, but it did provide us with some very nice series. At number 3, we have the most recent playoffs, and that is the 2022 NBA playoffs. Maybe this is recency bias, but I actually think this is one of the better NBA playoffs we've seen. Some great series on here, a very talented playoffs in general. The NBA Finals was also pretty good with the Celtics and Warriors, the Warriors coming back from a 2-1 deficit. And every game for the most part was pretty solid, a very enjoyable one. We also have some other great series that went to Game 7, like Celtics against Heat, Celtics against the Bucks, Mavericks against the Suns. And this is all sprinkled in with some other very good series that went to Game 6. In my opinion, probably the best series of this playoffs was Celtics-Bucks in the Eastern Conference semifinals that went to 7 games. There were some really good games in this series, such as Game 3, where Al Horford would have had a tip in to bring the game into overtime, but it was literally just a tenth of a second too late. Game 5 was great, as that's the Drew Holiday game where he blocked Smart and stole the ball in the final couple possessions to steal the win in Game 5. And then Game 6 is great, as that's probably Tatum's best game of his entire career. I wish Game 7 was a little bit more entertaining, but as a Celtics fan, I cannot complain with the result. As the best game of this playoffs, this was a tough one, but I'm going to have to say Nets-Celtics Game 1 of the series. That includes Tatum's game-winning layup. This game was competitive throughout the whole way, plenty of lead changes back and forth. Kyrie was hitting everything, Brown was hitting everything, and then Tatum just finished it off at the end. A very stress-inducing game. And just that whole series was great, even though it was a sweep, yes, but it probably was the best sweep in NBA history. And the reason I say that is because every single game came within 10 points and was down to the wire. Literally, if every other game went slightly different, it could have been a sweep for the Nets. The 2022 playoffs was definitely one of the better ones. At number 2, we have the 2013 playoffs, and the 2013 playoffs was great. The first round, 6 out of 8 of the series went to Game 6 or more, that one other being the Bulls-Nets series, which went to 7. We also have 2 solid semifinal series between the Spurs and the Warriors, and the Pacers and the Knicks, both ending in 6 games. The Eastern Conference Finals has the iconic Heat vs. Pacers series that went to 7, where it was kind of Paul George's emergent series, but even despite that, LeBron, Wade, they capitalized, they won the series. The best series of this playoffs is definitely the finals. It could be the very best finals ever. In my opinion, it isn't. I'm still giving that to the one that's coming up next, and I think you guys know what that one is. But this one is insane. It was a hard-fought, close finals throughout the first 5 games. But Game 6, it was such an incredible game, with Ray Allen making one of the best shots in NBA history, saving the Heat, forcing that game to go into overtime, and the Heat capitalized, winning a close game in Game 6, forcing a Game 7, which also happened to be a close game, and the Heat would win that one, winning an improbable finals. That's the best series. The best game in the entire playoffs would no doubt be Game 6 of Spurs Heat with Ray Allen's clutch 3. This series in itself makes the entire playoffs. Once again, it has solid other series to back it up too, so it's not like this playoffs is all about the finals. There's some other good series to help support it. That being said, that's why 2013 is almost the best playoffs we've seen in the last decade. But at number 1, we have the 2016 NBA playoffs. Obviously, this has the Cavaliers-Warriors Game 7 finals where Cleveland came back down 3-1, which in my opinion is the best finals that has ever happened. Every game was competitive, very close, a comeback story, talent on both sides, and just obviously the best series of this playoffs. The best game of this playoffs is obviously Game 7, where we have LeBron's iconic block, the iconic fourth quarter duel between these two teams, Kyrie's clutch 3, everything. An absolute insane Game 7 that I'm so happy I watched that. And that's just the finals, okay? Like, that alone would make this a top 3 playoffs. But let's look at the supporting cast here. We also have the Western Conference Finals, which was another iconic series of Warriors Thunder, which also went to 7 games. The Warriors also came back from a 3-1 deficit. And this was the series that changed the landscape of the NBA. This is why KD joined the Warriors. OKC wins this. KD stays most likely. So that's another insane series. We also saw Game 6 Clay in that series. So that's 2 insane series in the same playoffs. We also have the Toronto-Miami series, which also went to Game 7, which is pretty good. The Heat-Hornet series. The Raptors-Pacers series. All of those went to Game 7, by the way. The Eastern Conference Finals between Cleveland and Toronto went to Game 6. Pretty good series. And only 2 sweeps. So everything else is just a perfectly rounded playoffs with some insane series, a great supporting cast, and great talent. And that is why I think the 2016 NBA playoffs is the best playoffs in the past decade and NBA history as well. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy. You don't have to agree with me, but if you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments. What is your guys' rankings of these playoffs? Definitely put your rankings in the comments. I always enjoy looking at what viewers think, what things I could do better. If you guys did enjoy, once again, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out as we're trying to grow. And yeah, this was a fun video, guys, to make, and I hope you guys had a fun time watching it. And I'll see you guys in the next Heaps video.